It was a winter night that would be remembered for generations in the small town of Blackwater Creek. The wind howled like a chorus of lost souls, and snowflakes fell from the heavens in an unrelenting storm, blanketing the land in a thick, icy shroud. Few dared to venture out into such weather, but there were those who had no choice. And so it was that a young girl, no older than 12, found herself abandoned in the heart of this blizzard. Her name was Clara Mayfield, though by the time her story reached the ears of the townsfolk, she was simply known as the girl who survived. Her journey began innocently enough, a trip with her father across the mountains to deliver supplies to a distant settlement. But little did they know that fate had other plans. As the storm intensified, their wagon became stuck in the deepening drifts, and panic set in. Her father, John Mayfield, a man hardened by years of living on the frontier, made a decision that would haunt him forever. He left Clara behind. "I'll go find help," he said, his voice trembling despite his attempt to sound reassuring. "Stay here. Don't move." Clara nodded, tears freezing on her cheeks even as she tried to hold them back. She watched as her father disappeared into the swirling white abyss, each step growing fainter until he vanished entirely. Alone, she pulled her woolen blanket tighter around her shoulders and huddled against the side of the overturned wagon, praying silently for salvation. But salvation came not in the form of men or horses, but something far more unexpected and terrifying, until the wolves arrived. The forest surrounding the clearing where Clara waited was eerily silent, save for the relentless wind. It was almost as if nature itself held its breath, waiting for what was to come. The cold bit at her skin, seeping through every layer of clothing until she felt numb all over. Her teeth chattered uncontrollably, and her fingers stiffened into useless claws. Death seemed inevitable, a cruel end to a life barely begun. But then, amidst the chaos of the storm, came a sound that froze her blood colder than the frost clinging to her eyelashes, the low growl of a wolf. At first, Clara thought she must be imagining things. After all, fear could play tricks on the mind when one was alone in the wilderness. But soon, the growling grew louder, accompanied by the crunch of snow beneath padded paws. From the shadows emerged a pair of glowing eyes, piercing through the darkness like twin lanterns. Then another pair, and another. A pack of wolves materialized from the trees, surrounding the clearing where Clara cowered. Their fur was matted with snow, their breath visible in clouds of vapor as they circled her warily. For a moment, Clara thought her end had come, not from the cold, but from these fierce predators. She closed her eyes, expecting the sharp sting of fangs tearing into her flesh. But nothing happened. Instead, the wolves stopped circling. They did not attack. Instead, they formed a wall around her, their bodies creating a barrier between her and the biting wind. Confused and frightened, Clara opened her eyes just wide enough to see what was happening. The lead wolf, a massive creature with fur the color of ashen eyes that burned with intelligence, stared directly at her. There was no malice in its gaze, only something else, something she couldn't quite place. As the hours passed, the wolves remained steadfast, refusing to leave her side. They pressed close to her, sharing their body heat to keep her warm. When the wind shifted and threatened to blow away her fragile shelter, they repositioned themselves to block the gusts. It was unbelievable, almost magical, as though the animals understood her plight and chose to protect her rather than prey upon her. Little did Clara know, however, that this act of kindness was not random. These wolves were not ordinary creatures. They were bound to her by a hidden connection, one that stretched back centuries before she was born. Days turned into nights, and nights back into days, though Clara lost track of time in the endless whiteness of the storm. The wolves never faltered in their vigil, and slowly, her fear gave way to gratitude. She began speaking softly to them, her voice barely audible over the howling wind. "Thank you," she whispered once, clutching the edge of her blanket. "I don't know why you're doing this, but thank you." The lead wolf tilted its head, as if listening intently. Whether it understood her words or merely sensed her emotions, Clara couldn't say. But she felt a strange comfort in their presence, a sense that she wasn't truly alone after all. When the storm finally broke, the world outside the clearing revealed itself in stark relief. The sky above was a pale blue, dotted with wispy clouds, and the sun cast long shadows across the snow-covered landscape. The wolves gathered around Clara, nudging her gently with their muzzles, urging her to stand. Weak but determined, she obeyed, leaning heavily on the side of the wagon for support. And that's when she saw them, men on horseback, riding toward the clearing. Relief flooded through her veins, followed quickly by confusion. How had they found her? Had her father returned? As the riders drew closer, Clara recognized one of them, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a scar running down the side of his face. His name was Ezekiel Hayes, and he was the sheriff of Blackwater Creek. He dismounted swiftly, striding toward her with a look of concern etched onto his rugged features. "Are you all right, miss?" he asked gruffly, his eyes sweeping over her form. "We've been searching for you and your pa since the storm hit." "My father—" Clara's voice cracked. "Did you find him?" Ezekiel hesitated, his expression darkening. "We haven't yet," he admitted, "but we'll keep looking. That's a promise." Clara nodded, tears welling up in her eyes again. But before she could say anything more, the lead wolf let out a sudden bark, drawing everyone's attention. The entire pack stood at the edge of the clearing, watching the humans with unwavering focus. "What in the devil?" Ezekiel muttered, reaching instinctively for his gun. But Clara stepped forward, placing herself between the sheriff and the wolves. "Don't hurt them," she cried, her voice urgent. "They saved me. Without them, I wouldn't have survived the storm." Ezekiel lowered his hand, clearly skeptical but unwilling to argue with the evidence before him. The wolves continued to watch, their presence both protective and enigmatic. Finally, the lead wolf gave a final bark, then turned and disappeared into the woods, the rest of the pack following closely behind. For a long moment, silence reigned in the clearing. Then Ezekiel cleared his throat, addressing Clara with a mixture of admiration and bewilderment. "You're a lucky girl," he said. "Not many people get second chances like this. Let's get you home." Home. The word echoed in Clara's mind as she climbed onto the back of one of the horses, her body weary but her spirit buoyed by hope. Yet even as she rode away, she couldn't shake the feeling that her encounter with the wolves meant something deeper, something beyond human understanding. Back in Blackwater Creek, news of Clara's survival spread like wildfire. People marveled at her tale, some dismissing it as mere luck, while others whispered about supernatural forces at work. Ezekiel kept quiet about the wolves, choosing instead to focus on the search for John Mayfield. Days turned into weeks, and still there was no sign of him. Clara spent her days recovering under the care of the townspeople, her heart heavy with worry for her father. At night, she often dreamed of the wolves, their glowing eyes watching over her like sentinels. She wondered if she'd ever see them again, or if they were part of a larger mystery she was destined to uncover. But then one evening, as the stars twinkled brightly overhead, everything changed. Ezekiel burst into the cabin where Clara was staying, his face pale and grave. "We found him," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Your father, he's alive." Clara gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. "Alive? How could that be possible?" She followed Ezekiel outside, where a group of men surrounded a figure slumped in the saddle of a horse. Despite the dirt and exhaustion etched onto his face, Clara recognized her father immediately. "Daddy!" she cried, rushing forward to embrace him. John Mayfield hugged her tightly, his own tears mingling with hers. "I'm so sorry," he murmured, his voice hoarse. "I never meant to leave you behind. I thought you were gone." "But you weren't," Clara said firmly, pulling back to look at him. "And neither was I. Those wolves, they kept me safe until help arrived." John stared at her, disbelief written all over his face. "Wolves," he repeated. "You mean they actually helped you?" Clara nodded, recounting the details of her ordeal. As she spoke, John's expression grew increasingly troubled. When she finished, he sighed deeply, running a hand through his hair. "I think I know why," he said quietly. "There's something I need to tell you, something about our family that I should have told you long ago." Curious and apprehensive, Clara listened intently as her father revealed the truth. Their ancestors, it turned out, had made a pact with the spirits of the forest generations ago, a pact that granted protection to their descendants in times of dire need. In exchange, the family was tasked with safeguarding the balance between humans and nature. The wolves, John explained, were not merely wild animals. They were guardians, bound to the Mayfields by this ancient agreement. And now, it seemed, Clara had inherited the responsibility of maintaining that bond. Though shocked by the revelation, Clara felt a strange sense of peace settle over her. She understood now why the wolves had acted as they did, why they had chosen to protect her above all others. It was her destiny, one she embraced fully as she looked up at the starry sky. From that day forward, Clara dedicated herself to honoring the legacy of her family. She learned the ways of the forest, communicated with the wolves, and ensuring that the harmony between humanity and nature endured. And though her father eventually passed on, leaving her alone once more, she knew she was never truly alone, not with the wolves watching over her. In the annals of Blackwater Creek, Clara Mayfield became a legend, a symbol of resilience, courage, and the unbreakable ties that bind us to the natural world. And though few believe the full extent of her story, those who witnessed the wolves' devotion to her could not deny the magic that lingered in the air whenever her name was spoken. The girl who survived, the girl who was left behind in the blizzard, until a pack of wolves formed a wall, a tale that would live on forever, carried by the winds of the Wild West. The revelation of her family's pact with the wolves was only the beginning for Clara Mayfield. As days turned into weeks and weeks into months, Clara found herself drawn deeper into the mysteries of the forest and the creatures that inhabited it. Her father's words echoed in her mind constantly. Asterisk, they are not just animals, Clara. They are protectors, bound to us by an ancient promise. It is your duty now to uphold that promise. Asterisk. But Clara wasn't ready for the full weight of this responsibility. She spent countless nights staring out at the moonlit woods, wondering if she truly deserved such a destiny. Yet, every time doubt crept into her heart, the wolves would remind her of their presence, whether through the distant howl of the lead wolf or the faint tracks they left near her cabin. One crisp morning, as the first light of dawn painted the frost-covered ground with golden hues, Clara decided to venture deeper into forest than she ever had before. The air smelled fresh, tinged with the scent of pine and earth, and the silence was profound, broken only by the occasional chirp of a bird or the rustle of leaves stirred by the wind. Her boots crunched softly against the frozen ground as she walked, her breath forming small clouds of vapor in front of her face. She carried nothing but a small satchel containing provisions and a knife strapped to her belt. Not because she feared danger, but because it was what her father had taught her to do. Always be prepared, he'd said. And though his lessons were once mere survival tips, they now felt like sacred knowledge passed down through generations. As she wandered further, the trees grew taller and denser, their branches intertwining high above to form a canopy that blocked much of sunlight. Shadows danced across the forest floor, and the temperature dropped noticeably. Clara wrapped her scarf tighter around her neck, her eyes scanning the surroundings for any sign of life. She knew the wolves were nearby. She could feel it in her bones, even if she couldn't see them, until she heard it, the unmistakable sound of growling. Clara froze, her heart pounding in her chest. From behind a cluster of boulders emerged a figure unlike anything she had seen before. It was a man, but not entirely human. His body was covered in matted fur, his claws long and sharp, and his eyes glowed with an otherworldly intensity. He stood on two legs, yet moved with the grace and agility of predator. This was no ordinary creature. It was something out of legend, folklore brought to life before her very eyes. Clara's breath caught her throat as the creature stepped closer, its movements deliberate and measured. For a moment, she thought it might attack, but instead, it stopped several paces away, tilting its head as if studying her. Then, to her astonishment, it spoke. "You carry the bloodline," the creature rasped, its voice deep and gravelly, yet strangely melodic. "The wolves have chosen well." Clara stumbled backward, her mind reeling. Who are you?" she stammered. "I am Kale," the creature replied, lowering itself slightly into a crouching position. "Once a man, now something more. A guardian, like the wolves, like you'll become." Clara shook her head, unable to process what she was hearing. I don't understand. What do you mean, like me? I'm just a girl. Kale let out a low chuckle, the sound reverberating through the forest. Just a girl? No, child. You are the key to maintaining the balance between worlds. Your ancestors forged a bond with the spirits of the land, a bond that must be renewed with each generation. The wolves protected you because they recognized your potential. But there is more to come. Clara, much more. Before Clara could ask another question, Kale raised a clawed hand, signaling for her to follow. Reluctantly, she obeyed, her curiosity overpowering her fear. Together, they ventured deeper into the forest until they reached a clearing bathed in silvery light. At the center of the clearing stood an ancient stone circle, moss-covered and weathered by time. In the middle of the circle lay a single object, a dagger with a hilt carved from bone and a blade that shimmered as though made of liquid silver. This is the blade of harmony, Kale explained, his tone solemn. It has been waiting for you. With it, you can strengthen the bond between the human world and the spirit realm. Without it, chaos will reign. Clara approached the dagger cautiously, her fingers trembling as she reached out to touch it. The moment her skin brushed against the cold metal, a surge of energy coursed through her body, filling her with visions of past battles, forgotten rituals, and the faces of those who had come before her. When the visions faded, she looked up at Kale, her expression resolute. "I'll do whatever it takes," she declared. "I won't let the bond break, not on my watch." Kale nodded approvingly. "Good. But beware, Clara. There are forces that seek to destroy what we guard. Forces that will stop at nothing to sever the connection between worlds." Little did Clara know, these words would prove prophetic sooner than she imagined. Back in Blackwater Creek, rumors began to spread about strange occurrences in the surrounding wilderness. Livestock went missing without a trace. Travelers reported hearing eerie whispers in the night, and some claimed to have seen shadowy figures lurking just beyond the edge of sight. At first, the townsfolk dismissed these tales as superstition, but as the incidents grew more frequent and alarming, panic started to set in. Ezekiel Hayes, ever vigilant, organized patrols to investigate the disturbances. Clara joined one of these patrols, eager to learn more about the threats Kale had warned her about. As they rode through the forest, tension hung thick in the air, and Clara couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Then, without warning, the sky darkened and a chilling wind swept through the trees. From the shadows emerged a group of men, or rather, creatures that resembled men. Their skin was pale and clammy, their eyes hollow and dead. They moved with unnatural speed, attacking patrol with ferocity unmatched by any mortal foe. Clara drew the blade of harmony, its silver glow illuminating the darkness around her. With a cry, she charged forward, swinging the blade with surprising strength and precision. Each strike seemed to weaken the creatures, sending them retreating into the shadows. But for every one she defeated, another took its place, and soon the patrol was overwhelmed. Just when all hope seemed lost, a familiar howl split the air. From the treeline emerged the wolves, led by the ash-colored alpha, whose glowing eyes Clara had come to recognize as her protector. Without hesitation, the pack surged forward, tearing into the creatures with fangs and claws. The tide of battle turned swiftly, and within moments, the enemy was vanquished. Breathless and shaken, Clara sank to her knees, clutching the blade of harmony tightly. Ezekiel knelt beside her, concern etched onto his weathered face. "What was that?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Clara didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked around at the carnage, her mind racing. These creatures weren't ordinary. They were manifestations of the same darkness Kale had spoken of. And if they were already this strong, what chance did the town or the world have against whatever force controlled them? "We need to prepare," Clara finally said, standing to her feet. "Blackwater Creek isn't safe. Not anymore." Ezekiel nodded grimly. "And neither are you, I suspect." Clara met his gaze, her resolve unwavering. "Then I'll make sure I'm ready. For myself, for the town, and for the wolves who trust me to keep the balance." In the weeks that followed, Clara trained tirelessly, honing both her physical skills and her understanding of the mystical forces at play. Under Kale's guidance, She learned to wield the blade of harmony not just as a weapon, but as a conduit for the energy that flowed between the human and spirit realms. She practiced calling upon the wolves, strengthening the bond between them until it became second nature. But even as she grew stronger, Clara couldn't ignore the growing sense of unease that gnawed at her. The attacks on the outskirts of Blackwater Creek continued, growing bolder and more frequent. The townsfolk grew restless, some advocating for abandoning the area altogether, while others insisted on staying and fighting. Among those who chose to fight was Ezekiel Hayes, who refused to leave his post as sheriff despite the mounting danger. He and Clara formed an unlikely partnership, each bringing their unique strengths to the table. Ezekiel respected Clara's abilities, though he still harbored doubts about the supernatural elements of her story. Still, he trusted her judgment and her courage. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the world in shades of amber and crimson, Clara climbed to the highest point overlooking Blackwater Creek. The view was breathtaking, yet haunting. She could almost feel the tension radiating from the land itself, as though the earth itself knew what was coming. And then she saw it, a massive shadow moving across the hills, accompanied by the ominous sound of footsteps that seemed to shake the ground beneath her feet. Whatever it was far larger and more terrifying than anything she had faced before. Clara gripped the blade of harmony tightly, her heart pounding in her chest. This was it, the final test of her strength, her courage, and her destiny. With the wolves at her side and Ezekiel rallying the townsfolk below, she prepared to face the unknown head-on. For in the Wild West, where legends walked among men, survival was never guaranteed, but bravery always mattered. The shadow loomed larger as Clara descended from her vantage point, her heart pounding in rhythm with the approaching menace. The ground trembled beneath her boots, and a cold wind swept through the trees, carrying with it an unsettling silence that seemed to freeze the very air. Every fiber of her being told her to run, to flee back to the safety of Blackwater Creek. But she stood firm, the blade of harmony glowing faintly in her hand. As the shadow emerged in the darkness, Clara's breath caught in her throat. It was no mere creature. It was a monstrosity, a towering figure cloaked in tattered robes that billowed like smoke around its skeletal frame. Its eyes burned with infernal light, and its mouth stretched wide in a snarl that exposed jagged teeth dripping with venomous saliva. This was not just a beast. This was a harbinger of destruction, a force unleashed by the same dark power that had been stalking the edges of the town. Clara's mind raced as she tried to make sense of what she was seeing. Kale's warnings echoed in her ears. Asterisk, there are forces that seek to destroy what we guard. Asterisk, could this be one of them? A manifestation of the chaos threatening to unravel the fragile balance between worlds? Before she could dwell on the question, the creature let out a deafening roar, shaking the earth and sending birds scattering into the sky. Clara staggered backward, her grip tightening on the blade. She called out silently to the wolves, their presence a comforting thought even if they were still hidden in the forest. Then, without warning, the creature lunged forward, its clawed hands raking toward her with terrifying speed. Clara barely managed to dodge, rolling to the side as the ground where she had stood moments before crumbled under the force of the blow. She scrambled to her feet, her chest heaving as she prepared for the next attack. But the monster did not strike again immediately. Instead, it paused, tilting its head as though studying her. Then, in a voice that resonated deep within her bones, it spoke. "You dare to stand against me?" it growled, its words more felt than heard. "You, a mere child of flesh and blood, wielding a trinket that cannot hope to pierce my armor?" Clara gritted her teeth, refusing to let fear take hold. "I'm not just a child," she shot back, her voice steadier than she expected. "And this isn't just a trinket. It's a key to stopping you, and whatever brought you here." The creature laughed, a sound like grinding stone and snapping branches. "Foolish girl, you think your little dagger can stop the inevitable? The balance you cling to is already broken. Your kind has tipped the scales too far. Now all will burn." With those chilling words, the creature surged forward once more, its movements faster and more unpredictable than before. Clara parried its strikes with the blade of harmony, each impact sending shock waves up her arms. Sparks flew as the blade connected with the creature's claws, and for a moment she saw something. faint cracks appearing in its otherwise impenetrable form. Encouraged, Clara pressed her advantage, striking again and again, forcing the creature to retreat. But despite her growing confidence, she knew she couldn't keep this up forever. Her strength was waning, and the creature showed no signs of slowing down. That's when the wolves arrived. From the treeline erupted a chorus of howls, followed by the thundering charge of the pack. Led by the ash-colored alpha, they leapt into the fray, their fangs tearing into the creature's flesh. Even the mighty beast faltered under the onslaught, roaring in anger and pain as the wolves drove it back. Clara seized the opportunity, rushing forward and plunging the blade of Harmony straight into the creature's chest. There was a blinding flash of light, and for a split second, everything went silent. When the light faded, the creature was gone, leaving behind only a pile of ash that scattered in the wind. Breathless and trembling, Clara sank to her knees, the weight of the battle finally catching up to her. The wolves gathered around her, their glowing eyes filled with pride and relief. The alpha nudged her gently with his nose, urging her to stand. Slowly, she rose to her feet, her legs shaky but resolute. Back in Blackwater Creek, the aftermath of the encounter became the talk of the town. Though few believed the full extent of Clara's tale, there was no denying the evidence left behind. The scorched earth, the shattered rocks, and the undeniable feeling that something monumental had occurred in the woods. Ezekiel Hayes met Clara at the edge of the forest, his expression a mix of awe and concern. "You did it," he said simply, his voice heavy with unspoken questions. "I didn't do it alone," Clara replied, glancing over her shoulder at the treeline where the wolves had vanished. "They saved me." Ezekiel nodded slowly, accepting the truth even if he didn't fully understand it. "Whatever's going on out there," he said, "it's bigger than any of us. But I trust you, Clara, and if anyone can handle it, it's you." Clara smiled faintly, though the smile didn't quite reach her eyes. She knew the fight wasn't over, not by a long shot. The creature's final words haunted her still. Asterisk, the balance you cling to is already broken. Asterisk, what did it mean? Was there truly no saving the world from the chaos spreading across the land? Cale appeared later that night, stepping silently into the cabin where Clara sat staring into the fire. His presence was both comforting and unnerving, a reminder of the ancient forces at play. "The battle you fought today was only the beginning," he said gravely. "The creature was but a herald of what is to come. The darkness grows stronger, feeding on the imbalance caused by humanity's greed and disregard for the natural order." Clara sighed, running a hand through her hair. "So what do we do? How do we fix it?" Cale hesitated, his glowing eyes reflecting the flickering flames. "There's an old ritual, a way to restore the balance completely, but it comes at great cost." "What kind of cost?" Clara asked sharply, her instincts telling her she wouldn't like the answer. "A life," Cale replied bluntly. "Yours or another's. Someone must sacrifice themselves to seal the rift between worlds and bind the darkness once more." Clara froze, the weight of his words crushing her chest. Sacrifice herself? She thought back to her father, who had abandoned her in the storm, yet had done so believing it was the only way to save her. Would she have the courage to make the same choice? To give everything for the greater good? "I need time to think about this," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Cale bowed his head slightly. "Take all the time you need. But remember, the clock is ticking. Each day the darkness gains strength. Soon it may be too late." Days turned into weeks as Clara wrestled with the decision before her. She spent hours in the forest, meditating near the stone circle where she had first found the blade of Harmony. The wolves stayed close, sensing her turmoil and offering their silent support. Meanwhile, Ezekiel worked tirelessly to fortify Blackwater Creek, organizing patrols and rallying the townsfolk to prepare for whatever might come next. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the world in hues of gold and crimson, Clara made her choice. She returned to the stone circle, the blade of Harmony clutched tightly in her hand. The wolves gathered around her, their glowing eyes filled with understanding. Even Cale appeared, standing silently at the edge of the clearing. "This is the right thing to do," Clara said, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat. If sacrificing myself can save everyone else, if it can bring peace to the land, then so be it. Kale stepped forward, his expression unreadable. Are you certain? Once begun, the ritual cannot be undone. Clara nodded firmly. I am. The ritual began, a series of incantations, and gestures passed down through generations. As Clara raised a blade of harmony high above her head, the sky darkened and a vortex of swirling energy formed above the stone circle. The wolves howled in unison, their voices merging into a haunting melody that seemed to shake the very heavens. When the ritual reached its climax, Clara plunged the blade into her own chest, releasing a surge of energy that illuminated the entire forest. For a brief moment, she felt herself floating, suspended between worlds, her consciousness expanding beyond the confines of her body. She saw visions of the past, the present, and the future, of lives lived and lost, of battles won and sacrifices made. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, it ended. Clara collapsed to the ground, her body lifeless but her spirit free. The wolves mourned her passing, their howls echoing through the night. Kale knelt beside her, closing her eyes with a clawed hand. She has paid the ultimate price, he said solemnly. But her sacrifice will not be forgotten. The balance is restored for now. In the days that followed, a profound peace settled over Blackwater Creek and the surrounding lands. The attacks ceased, the shadows retreated, and the land began to heal. The townsfolk spoke of Clara Mayfield in hushed tones, calling her a hero, a savior, a legend. They built a monument in her honor, carving her name into the base of the stone circle where she had performed the ritual. Yet, even in death, Clara's story was not truly finished. Deep within the forest, whispers carried on the wind spoke of sightings. A young girl with fiery determination, accompanied by a pack of wolves, walking the line between worlds. Some claimed she watched over the land still, ensuring that the balance remained intact. Others believed she had been reborn, destined to face new challenges in the ever-changing cycle of life and death. And so, the legend of Clara Mayfield endured, a testament to the power of courage, sacrifice, and the unbreakable bonds between humans, nature, and the spirits that walk among them. In the Wild West, where legends walked and myths came to life, Clara's name would live on forever, a beacon of hope in a world forever teetering on the edge of chaos.